Well, voters in Mexico are gearing up for a major presidential election this Sunday. Andrés Manuel López Obrador, also known as AMLO, is considered the frontrunner. He's expected to be Mexico's first leftist president since the 1930s. López Obrador has campaigned on anti-corruption and prides himself as a friend of the working man. But he'll face a series of challenges, including President Trump, trade, the border crisis, and deadly violence in Mexico. So for more on this, I want to bring in CBS News contributor Willis Sparks. He writes for Signal, a newsletter produced by GZERO Media. All right, Willis, let's talk about AMLO. I guess after having four names, everyone just calls him AMLO, right?
He's fine with that too. Yeah.
Right. We have a presidential election. Give me a sense of just how significant this election is.
It is a big deal because, as you said in the intro, he is the first quote-unquote leftist president since the 1930s, in a country where the left hasn't obviously done well for decades. And so people think, well, what does it mean that he's leftist?
Yeah.
Does it, his opponents have tried to cast him as Hugo Chavez, as a radical ideologue who's going to turn Mexico into Venezuela and this disaster. It's not really who López Obrador is. López Obrador's been around a long time. He was mayor of Mexico City for 5 years between 2000 and 2005. And by all accounts, he did a very good job. He left with a very high approval rating. He worked with political opponents. He made deals. He improved the infrastructure that was badly needed in Mexico City. So when we say leftist, he's not Fidel Castro. He's not Hugo Chavez. He's a guy who makes deals, but he's also a guy who is going to speak on behalf of some people in Mexico who are not used to having someone speak for them. In particular, people in the rural south of Mexico who tend to be underrepresented in Mexican politics. He's talked a lot about investing in that southern region to try to help with with poverty in that part of the country. So, it's not a lot of suspense this weekend. We know he's going to win. It's a question of does he win by 15 or 20 points.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's lopsided.
It's a done deal, basically.
And it is a one-round election, unlike some other countries. And
safe election? Will this be safe on Sunday?
Well, there's nothing in Mexico safe. 120 politicians have been murdered during this campaign.
During this campaign alone?
Just during the campaign.
Wow.
Homicide rates in Mexico are at record levels. There's a lot of reasons for that have to do with drug gangs, the flow of guns coming in across the border from the United States.
Right.
The police are outgunned. Drug gangs are becoming more powerful. Violence is actually spreading to parts of the country that had been immune to that level of violence before. So actually, crime is one of the most important issues that AMLO is going to have to deal with, in particular violent crime and gang-related crime.
And I imagine another big issue is going to be how he gets along with our president, President Donald Trump. When you talked about drugs and guns, in my head, I heard the president say they're bringing drugs, they're bringing guns across the border. What's the prediction in terms of how these two men will get along?
On the one hand, López Obrador is a pragmatic guy. And he understands that if you're going to be president of Mexico, you have to, on some level, get along with the president of the United States, because the giant neighbor to the north is really important to Mexico's economy, to life, and all the border questions, obviously. You got to try to get along, and I've seen a lot of reporting that suggests that behind the scenes that AMLO has been reaching out to Trump advisors, trying to get a relationship going that's at least stable, if not a warm relationship. However, López Obrador is a guy who actually wrote a book right after Trump won the election that is basically called Oye Trump in Spanish, which basically means, hey, Trump, listen up. And he was pretty heavily critical of Trump in that book. I don't think that AMLO wants to get into a war of words with Trump, but he is going to criticize things. Like he's criticized the immigration policy, in particular the separation of families issue. Trump's going to hear something that he doesn't like. Trump is going to insult López Obrador. López Obrador is not going to stay silent. The man that López Obrador is going to replace, Enrique Peña Nieto, who's been president to this point, developed a reputation in Mexico for trying to appease Donald Trump. You got to have a good relationship with Washington, but you don't want to be accused of letting President Trump walk all over you either. So there is the potential for a war of words that periodically really messes up U.S.-Mexican relations.
Interesting. Well, give us something else to talk about, I'm sure, in the future.
Absolutely.